we're going to get one of the most influential voices that we have on the channel talking to us about what those decisions, or at least one decision and one not so much of a decision, is going to mean as far as investor mood and confidence is concerned. Arvind Sanger, appreciate you joining us here on India Business Hour from New York. Let me start by asking you about the coal verdict. In a sense, the uncertainty is over because the court has said that what is illegal should not continue to operate, and they've given a 6-month window by when hopefully the government will get the auction process on the road. So that's the uncertainty part, when the government is going to roll out the auction, whether or not it will be able to meet that 6-month window. But how are foreign investors going to look at this verdict?
I think, at the end of the day, yes, the positive is the uncertainty is out of the way. But the negative is that you went back 20 years and you canceled all awards for 20 plus years. Plus, you're talking about putting penalties on the coal produced. Part of the problem in India is not just that you had policy paralysis because the government was not making decisions. I think you have courts which are second-guessing a lot of executive decisions and coming up with solutions which are, frankly, from an investor standpoint and from a business standpoint, negative. I guess this was known that it was coming, so in a sense it's good to have it out of the way. But, I mean, the coal problem is not fixed, so hopefully the government can get its act together and move this forward very quickly. And it should focus on not being punitive, because the people who have built the power plants or the aluminum plants or whatever next to these coal mines are the ones that are going to be the logical winners. And then you have this completely wild numbers that the CAG puts out, which has no bearing in reality of what the loss to the exchequer is. So hopefully some of this noise in the system in terms of courts and the CAG is going to die down, because clearly when the coal auctions are held, the people who have the plants right next to it will have the advantage to bid much lower than if it were a brand new coal block. And I'm hoping that the political noise of assuming that every time somebody is doing something where somebody has gotten paid off, there's a lot of that happened, but there was a lot which was done genuine, capex done by industry. So the hope would be that we can move this forward quickly without, second guessing continuously by, other parties.
But in this environment now, and given the regulatory overhang and the regulatory uncertainty, do you believe that investors are going to stay away from the infrastructure story, from the end user story, which is the steel and cement and the power sector, which clearly are facing difficult times and now the added uncertainty?
Well, so let's separate the sectors. Cement is dependent on what happens with infrastructure demand, and that whole story is not dependent on whether or not the coal blocks are allocated or not. But when you look at power and other infrastructure, and power especially, I think the uncertainties are still tremendous in terms of not just the coal part of it, but also the state electricity boards that are broke, and the fact that power plants are sitting idle, not because they don't have coal. There's some lying idle because they don't have coal. Others that are lying idle because
the financial restructuring plan hasn't worked.
That's right. So the state electricity boards can't afford to buy power. So you have so many problems. The Gordian knot, if I may call it that, of the power sector is going to require, and frankly, the last government tried a few things. It wasn't like the last government was not trying. It created this new restructuring plan, and the states didn't all sign up as quickly as we would have hoped. I'm hoping that that we can move quickly on that, because power is going to be a huge challenge for this government or for India in terms of its economic growth acting as a brake if you don't have enough power capacity coming on.
And speaking of the power sector, another decision that's been taken by the government today is to defer taking a decision on the gas price matter now till the 15th of November. And we've been talking about this on CNBC TV 18, whether the government actually had the political appetite to go through with this decision. It maintained that they would have met the September 30th deadline, but finally it seems that they've developed cold feet. How much of a negative is this going to be?
That's a much bigger negative. To me, that reflects a government that
negative than the coal verdict.
Than the coal verdict, because the coal verdict, frankly, was expected, and it's known. The fact that this government is unwilling to take decisions that might cause some populist anger with some people, and not willing to make a decision on that, is much more discouraging, given the fact that this government has such a mandate. And one of the first things that the Prime Minister said was about having to make some tough decisions. We haven't seen any. And every time they're faced with this decision where they have to make a tough decision, they keep kicking the can down the road. This reminds me of UPA all the way. And yes, we know there's a state election coming up, but that's an excuse we heard for the last 3-4 years with the last government. So are we off to, at the beginning of this, starting off with the same, approach of kicking the can down the road? And frankly, the other part of it is that from everything that I hear, the decision that is going to come down is going to be worse than the somewhat finally courageous decision the last government did to provide some transparency on the pricing. 850. If you're doing 650, you don't really bother. Nobody's coming to India. If you want to put up a sign, shut for investment in hydrocarbons, it's a great policy. If you want to put up a sign, would like to have investments in hydrocarbon, it needs to be completely different, because at $6.50 gas, the gas is going to stay beautifully underground and is not going to be helping the Indian consumer. So yes, some will be, the populists will be happy that Reliance got quote-unquote punished, but the country will be a big loser if that is the price.
Is the honeymoon period over with this government? Are investors now starting to lose patience? Because it's not reflecting in the stock market movement that we're seeing yet.
Not yet, because there's still signs that at least some of the machinery of project approvals and environmental stuff is moving on. But I think it is dangerously close to where we need to see some big decisions where the government does. Yes, it is it is creating some better approvals. So when I talk to businessmen, let's talk about the positives. Yeah. When I talk to businessmen, one of the things that they all talk about is how the government is reaching out to them, the ministers and the bureaucrats, which never happened in the past, and asking them, how can we fix your problems? So there is an effort to try to develop comprehensive policies, and part of the explanation is it's taking time, but they're hard at work getting industry feedback to try to fix problems. So I think the reason the honeymoon period is still alive, even despite this, 1 or 2 decisions or non-decisions, is because there's hope that there's some stuff coming out that is going to be comprehensive, that is going to show. But I think if in the next 2 or 3 months, we don't see some action that is tangible and measurable and discernible. I'll tell you one other disaster this week. Very small, but didn't get commented on. The government announced in its budget is disinvestment targets. Right. Guess what? I don't know who advised the finance minister, but they lead off with sale. Yeah. If you had to pick an absolutely disastrous, terribly run PSU, you couldn't have done a better job of picking that. Why would you lead off your disinvestment with the one that is destined to fail, which now they've said we're not going to do it because the stock has dropped too much, whatever. In a bull market, there are so many options that they could have chosen.
But what about ONGC now? Because ONGC and Coal India were the next big ones that they were looking at. ONGC, you still don't have clarity on gas. You won't have it till November. Coal and Coal India, given all the uncertainty around this sector, so what happens after the disinvestment target and the government paper?
That's right. So, you have other options. You have some of the stocks of Axis Bank and others owned by Suti. That would be easy to do. That would meet your disinvestment target. You have things like Hindustan Zinc and Balco, which you have a willing buyer, and all the things have been cleared up. So there are options out there, and frankly, yes, you can't keep doing the same thing that the last government did, which is put PSUs in front of investors and ask them to sign up without any clarity on how they're going to earn returns on their investment. And I think I'm not sure that there is an organized thought process here which seems to be discernible to us investors.
I am going to have to take a break, Arvind, and we'll continue that conversation. But very quickly, before we actually take that break, you're not sounding bullish on India at all.
Well, I've been getting a little more cautious in the last couple of weeks because I think the global macro environment is looking a little less favorable. Yeah. So when India is this vast outlier versus the rest of the world, and it is not doing enough to justify that outlier status. If the rest of the world was doing fine and things were hunky-dory and everything else in India can do, but if there is any risk-off trade that happens, India has a little more risk than others unless it starts to show a reason why it should continue to deserve that outlier status. So I have gotten a little more cautious in the last